Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Daily Homeroom live stream. Sal here from Khan Academy. For those of y'all who are new to this is a live stream that we've been doing every day since we've had these global school closures, just as a way to stay connected. Obviously, Khan Academy, our whole team, we were trying to put out resources, starting at early learning with Khan Academy kids all the way through elementary, middle, and high school, and even early college to keep you learning. But we also want to provide more supports. We've been running parent webinars, teacher webinars, this homeroom live stream, where we're going to have really interesting guests, including today, I'm especially excited about. But I do want to give my standard announcement, reminding folks that we are a not-for-profit. We only can exist because of philanthropic donations. We were running at a deficit even before COVID hit, and now with COVID, we're seeing our traffic 3x of what it typically is. We are trying to do more programs and ways to support you. So if you're in a position to do so, please think about donating. I want to give special thanks to several corporations that have stepped up really in record time to support this effort. Bank of America, that first weekend when they saw that we needed, they stepped up to help us out. Google.org, AT&T, Fastly, and Novartis. Thank all of them. And even with their significant support, we still need more help. So if you represent a corporation, please talk to us. And if you're just an individual donor, that still makes a huge difference for our ability to serve tens of millions of folks around the world. So with that, I am super excited to introduce our guest, Angela Duckworth. In certain circles, she is a megastar, I would say. I've known Angela for many years. I think we ran into each other at a conference in Canada. This was like 9 or 10 years ago, 8 or 9 years ago. But even then, I knew Angela was onto something, and since then, I think her notoriety has just exploded because the things she talks about are so relevant to education. I think especially relevant to the time that we're dealing with right now. So, Angela, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Sal. And I'm going to tell you a secret. You didn't just run into me. I actually flew to Canada because I knew someone had told me that you were going to be, and I ran into you, but not by accident. So I was stalking you.
That's well, you see, this is how the tables have turned because now I kind of stalk you, and
You just emailed
I'm
me.
like
It's a lot easier.
I'm
You
like
didn't have to
Angela,
fly to
I'm
Canada.
like exactly. I didn't. So I'm glad that we are mutually stalking each other. And I'm gonna start off the conversation, but I do want to encourage everyone who's watching on YouTube and Facebook, put questions in there for Angela, and you're gonna learn a lot more about her areas of expertise if you don't already know of them. But I will start. Angela, you're known. You're one of really a handful of, I would say, pioneers or leaders in this field of mindset research, and you're really known for grit, defining it in more precise terms. So just explain what mindset research is and your view on it, especially relative to grit.
The term mindset has caught on. I have to think that it's got to be almost maybe the most commonly understood new scientific discovery in psychology and among non-psychologists, right? Among parents and kids and educators. So what is mindset? Mindsets are beliefs that you have about the world or about human nature that drive so much of your behavior. They may not be beliefs that you think about actively, but they're very powerful. And in particular, Carol Dweck at Stanford, our common friend, and really my hero, she's worked her whole life on something called growth mindset, beliefs about your intelligence. And you can either have a growth mindset, which is the belief that intelligence is malleable, that your abilities can change, or you can have a fixed mindset, which is the belief that they can't change, that you are who you are, you're either a math person or not, you're a natural athlete or not. And in my research on grit, which is passionate and persevering effort towards long-term goals, I find, and I think our early work with Carol, but in subsequent studies also, kids who have a growth mindset about intelligence tend to become grittier. And then those increases in grit tend to lead to increases in growth mindset. So there's a kind of virtuous cycle. When a kid really believes that their abilities can change, they're more likely to persevere, to try hard at things, which then reinforces that belief.
And just to make sure I understand these, because I often say these in the same sentence, and they are very closely related. Growth mindset is I believe that I can do more. I just have to step out of my comfort zone and apply myself. And if I fail at something, it's not a judgment on some type of innate ability. It's a moment to learn from. While grit is that ability to stick to it, to that
Yeah, I
even in
would
the
say
face of.
I mean, grit is a behavior. Grit is like doing it, right? And mindset might be why you're doing it, right? So
Mm,
mindset is like the underlying belief that would motivate a certain pattern of behavior that I would describe as grit. And let me just say, because my kids are still teenagers, and I'm sure a lot of people have kids who are even younger than ours. I think that it's not just when I think of grit. I don't think just of like working hard. It's also loving what you do. It's also being intrinsically motivated over long periods of time. So that's just a part of grit that I hope we can talk about in this conversation, because I don't want parents to get the message that the only thing kids need to do is develop a work ethic. They also have to develop interests, loves, passions.
yeah, and that's, I think, a good segue. I mean, you're a professor of psychology at University of Pennsylvania. You've been doing research for a while. You have a best-selling book named, not a surprise, Grit.
Yeah,
the,
no
the power
imagination
of
there on the
no,
title.
no, no, it's the power of passion and perseverance. I think a question that a lot of parents are asking. My wife asked me to ask you this when she saw that I was walking into the walk-in closet to interview you right now, and it's a question that has been coming up throughout the school closures. Is that there's a lot of resources out there. There's Khan Academy. We've put out daily schedules. But what is tangible advice for parents, teachers, or students for themselves to have that grit, to be able to act on that growth mindset, so to speak?
So I think that not only for grit, but for lots of other things that we would love our kids to develop as they grow older, the combination of challenge and support is magical. And if you ask the question like what are good parents, right? Like what does the science of parenting say? There's now decades of research on parenting styles, and the style of parenting that is the best, really. I mean, I could just say that flat out. Like, it's the best. Your kids will be happier, they'll be more socially adjusted, but they'll also be more accomplished. Like, it's this combination of being very supportive, but also being demanding. So you could say it's tough love. Now, why do I bring that up now in the middle of the COVID crisis? Because kids are being challenged. So their challenges have been, I think, in all cases and in many different ways, raised. Right now, the question is like, how as parents can you meet that with increased support? Not trivial because we're under our own stress, et cetera. But if you ask the question to me, like, where does psychological growth come from? It comes from this combination of like, I'm being asked to do something I can't yet do, but there's a floor beneath me. There's a foundation. There's unconditional support. There's Khan Academy. There are people who will help me, like make a schedule so I can go on Khan Academy. So I think parents can respond to this crisis by in some ways thinking of it as an opportunity for their kids to develop these qualities. I call them character strengths, but you can call them SEL skills. You can call them anything you want. And I really do think it's not too Pollyanna to say that it is an opportunity to do all those things.
And what would you? I mean, one, it's impressive that there is. I mean, people have done the research and they've been able to categorize different styles, and this what you're describing seems to be the winning style. And I'm personally insecure to see how well I'm. I hope no one audits me to see
I'll
if
give you a
I'm that style or
quiz.
not. Give me a quiz or watch our family. But what either from your research or just as a parent that you've seen of good practice? I know y'all have done a lot of research on interventions that can help change people's mindsets. So, I mean, one, I'd love to hear about that research. And then, are there things, let's say hypothetically, you were to have a 5.5-year-old at home or an 8-year-old
For
at home
example,
that, for example, I don't know, some people I know, and they sometimes do their work, but they're maybe just doing the minimum, or sometimes they don't even want to do that because they feel like there's a little less accountability now. What does the research tell us, and what advice would you have for this hypothetical person that I know?
yeah, well, I have a non-hypothetical 17 and a non-hypothetical 18-year-old, but non-hypothetical 5.5-year-old, it sounds like on your end. So I think one of the challenges of parenting is to always be titrating to where your kids are. Because when I said that you need to be, and I do believe this, like you need to be a demanding parent, I don't think kids need parents. Like they need us to ask them to do things that they can't yet or wouldn't on their own do. But the titration part is, how much is a stretch for your kid at this particular moment in time and also at this stage in their development. It may not be the same as it is even for another kid in the same family. So the titration is how to have your kids, be challenged, but not too much. And so, for example, when parents have a idealistic goal of like their kids waking up, making a schedule for the day, sticking to the schedule, if you start with a really unrealistic goal, and you ask your kid to get there, immediately, then everybody just gets discouraged and frustrated. So one piece of parenting advice is to take stock of where your kids are and then try to move like 10%, right, as opposed to like 100%, towards something that you think is better. And in general, I find that even adults procrastinate and don't do well when they fail to break down big goals into smaller parts and then make a more reasonable schedule about how they're going to accomplish, go down the list.
That's good advice, not just for parenting. I mean, I just while you were saying that, I'm thinking about some of the things that my wife and I have attempted to do, especially with some of our younger kids. I was like, yeah, maybe if we just broke that down a little bit more, or just expected the first step of that, and then once
I
he
mean,
built
Sal,
that
this is what
pattern.
you do so well. Like, by the way, I mean, I will just say you have taught my kids since, as you do so many kids around the world. Like, and you may not have known, but the reason I flew to Canada to stalk you was because my kids were spending so much time learning from you on Khan Academy, and I, just got really interested in how psychologists like me might learn something from you and be helpful. And I think what you do so well, Sal, is you break things down, into like parts so that like you can swallow it kind of like a teaspoon at a time. And I think kids need our help as parents to help them, do that. And I sometimes feel like, parents might have unrealistic expectations about, like how much progress they can, expect their kid to make when it comes to self-regulation or time management or discipline. And it helps to remember that the great teachers know to break things down.
No, well, I think you're being very flattering, but I think the point is right, and I think as parents, as much as we try to be centered, we can also sometimes feel an urgency, like, wait, I heard someone else's kid has their has their whole schedule and is doing everything perfectly, and then you're probably doing the wrong thing to your kid, and you're trying to get them from zero to that, and that other child probably isn't doing that. There's probably a little bit of marketing involved there.
I think we probably all have stories of, a child in my family was always these like cousins that I have in Boston who, were seemingly perfect. And actually now that I'm all grown up, I realize they were pretty much perfect and they all became, like Harvard professors.
Yeah, I'm
But I don't
afraid if
think
you're
that.
if you're the non-perfect one in the family, who
Oh,
knows what they're doing.
I think I'm the black sheep. But yes, there's a very distinguished branch of our family, but I'm not in it. Why do parents make those comparisons? I think they're just, they're kind of just what come to mind for the parent because they are, like, oh, that's the mental model I have in my head, so I'll just share it with you. But I don't think kids benefit very much from those kinds of comparisons. And in general, in schooling, I think, and I'm thinking, I know you have a global audience, but I'm thinking about the American schooling system. It's a very kind of rank ordered, like, how are you relative to these other like 900 kids who are your age? And those kind of comparisons, like, am I as smart as her? Am I smarter than him? I don't think they're super beneficial most of the time. I think kids actually benefit from a different kind of comparison, which is how am I compared to how I want to be compared to how I was, right? And that's a comparison that you can do something with, and that's a comparison that doesn't diminish another person by yourself making progress. And when I think about Khan Academy and your whole philosophy, because you have a book too, which I read, and your whole philosophy of like how education ought to work. I really do think it's you with you and like how far you can go, and not you and your cousins in Boston or you and the 899 kids who are also in your graduating class.
And I mean, with that thought, and there's a ton of questions coming in. I want to get to those questions, but I'll ask one of my last indulgent Sal questions, which is you've done a lot of research that you can change people's mindsets. I mean, tell us a little bit about some of the research that will give all of us a growth mindset about changing our kids' mindset about grit.
Well, I'll tell you about a big study that was run recently and published in Nature. It was a huge scientific team led by David Yeager at UT Austin, and also, of course, Carol Dweck was involved. I was just one among many team members. But what it was an experiment to see whether we could increase growth mindset in ninth graders all over the United States. And the experiment was a success. And if you ask the question, like, what did you do? How did you increase growth mindset? There were these brief, really just, minutes long activities where students, learned that lots of other kids around their age, also sometimes feel stupid when they get something wrong. And they can kind of slip into like, oh, I'll never learn this mode. But then they learned about the neuroscience that's actually true, that the brain is plastic, that there's tremendous growth. And when you do struggle and you make a mistake and you look at it again, that your brain actually changes. So for me, when I think about this, one of the reasons why intelligence is a hard thing to get kids to understand, like that it is malleable, it's because it's invisible. It's like it's in your, you can't see your brain, right? Whereas if you said to a kid, like, do you think if you lifted all these weights, your biceps would get bigger? They would say, like, of course. But intelligence is kind of behind, the forehead, so you don't see it. Anyway, ninth graders learned about the modern neuroscience of brain plasticity. And then the last thing that they did was they actually wrote a letter to other students that were, for example, like a little younger than you. Like, what would you say? How would you summarize all of this for them? And I think this combination of feeling like, oh, I hear the voices of other students who, can sometimes feel dumb when they do something, but then they learn to not feel that way, to understand mistakes as growth and learning. You get some scientific evidence, and then you are put in the position of communicating that to other students. I think it's quite brilliant, honestly. And in this study, there were measurable increases in mindset, growth mindset, and then also, particularly for students who had schools where the cultures supported it, there were also improvements in grades.
Wow. Just to make that
Actually,
very
and I should
tangible,
say test scores. I think there was,
test scores.
I should like check on that. I think it was like math grades and test scores. But yeah,
No,
as I
but either
said,
way, that's very compelling. I mean, are there ways for parents to get that intervention for either themselves or their kids?
yeah, I'll make sure that you all have the hyperlink to the work, and the some of this work was supported by the Mindset Scholars Network, and there's a link where you can actually get this also for educators. I mean, I'll make sure that you have the right resources, and finally, I'll just say I think parents should read Carol's book. I mean, they should read your book too. They should read lots of books, but I think Mindset is a terrific, and it's a fast read. It's beautifully written.
Good advice. So there's a lot of questions here. So from YouTube, Joe asks, Angela, can you use grit to force yourself to have a passion for something you have little interest in? For example, a job.
No. If you want more than a one-word answer, I can elaborate. But I don't think that you can force yourself to be passionate about things. When I measure intrinsic motivation, feeling genuinely curious about things, and also feeling like your work is aligned with your personal values, that is what's correlated with grit, not extrinsic, like I was coerced to do it, or I'll make a lot of money if I do it. So I think for me, the advice would not be to try to force yourself, but actually to find, if you're already an adult, like to find a job that is more closely aligned with your developed interests and your values. And if you're still a kid, I would say, the word you want to use about with passion is develop. I think you want to develop passions that are mature. And so that requires, lots and lots of time, doing things, becoming more and more and more interested in them and committed to them. But I don't think it's a process of forcing yourself, or for anybody else to force you either.
And this is really interesting because, so, grit, when people think of the word just in the colloquial sense, they think of like being able to power through pain
I
as one
know.
one form of grit. But that's not what you're saying.
Maybe I
You're saying
chose the
you
wrong
can
word.
you exhibit the no, it's a great word. You can exhibit the qualities of grit, but it's not because you're powering through pain, it's because you are intrinsically motivated in what you're doing.
Yeah, and I don't want to paint this like, look, you work really hard, Sal. I work really hard. I think there are parts of our day where we don't want to do what we have to do, but we have to do it. But I would say about myself, and I'm sure that you would say it about, like, you love what you do. You love what you do. And so yeah, there's practice and there's hard work and there's getting over disappointment. Nobody loves doing it, but overall you love what you do. And I think that's the part that's missing in that one syllable word, that it doesn't sound like it, but when I study it and when I find it in a really high performer, it's really always there.
I'll throw out a hack that I think is related to Joe's question, and I think it's consistent with what you said, but I have no scientific backing other than my N of one and what's going on in my own bizarre head, which is one of my skills that I have, and I'm quite proud of, is I can convince myself to be passionate about almost anything.
Is that
And so
right? Wait, give me an
almost
example. Like,
almost any, well, I mean, a lot of people in contact, I mean, they can hear it in my voice sometimes in these videos. Like, I'm
ah,
excited about the Aldol reaction. And they're like, why? I was like, well, I won't even make the video until I am excited about it because there is something exciting. In academics, what I remind students is almost everything is the culmination of someone's life work. And they would have killed to have the answers that you have in your textbook or that are being explained to you on a Khan Academy video. And that by itself makes it exciting. And even things as part of my job that I aren't like my favorite thing. I love our auditors; they're great people. But sitting in like a meeting about our audit report isn't like what I click my heels on. But I remind myself, no, this is a very important step in order for us to become a real organization, in order for us to serve more people. So I definitely do that. That I remind myself why what I'm doing matters. And
yes.
I had a boss that told me my first, I was working at a big company, and there's times that I was like, oh, it doesn't matter if I show up or not. I'm kind of a cog in this big thing. And he said, look, you just have to show up and make yourself and make the company better off today than it was yesterday. And there's something about that that made me feel very motivated about it. And I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, I can get passionate about that. But I think we're consistent. As long as you can
Yeah.
get yourself authentically passionate, motivated, then the grit will kind of happen or can happen.
Yeah, and okay, so you said, "Oh, this is your N of one." Like, well, let me give you a little science behind that. So, when you think about why you have to go to an auditing meeting, or think about kids doing their homework, right? I mean, so many kids feel like, "Why am I doing this? This is totally pointless." What they're feeling is that there isn't any purpose to their work. There
Mm.
isn't any, like, this is a means, but what's the end? And so what your boss did, and certainly what human beings do, is it's useful to think about your goals hierarchically. Like, why am I on this video with Khan Academy with Sal Khan? It's like, because actually I believe that psychological science can help kids thrive. So for me, this time that we're spending together has a purpose. If a kid is doing their homework and they see the point of doing these, practice problems, or like, and they see the point of this class overall, it's really like what you're doing is you're helping them see the kind of the goal that sits above this goal. Like, oh, this is the reason why I'm doing it. The hierarchy makes sense to me. So I agree with you that sometimes we forget and then we have to remind ourselves, and then it gives meaning and purpose to something that otherwise would be mundane. But I guess I wouldn't go so far as recommending to people that you could make yourself passionate about everything. I don't think that's what you're saying, but because I don't think it's possible for people to like really literally be randomly assigned to a job and then just be, because I think about your life, Sal, and I think, you know, uh, obviously it took an unexpected turn when you left, your career track and you became who you are today. But I also have to believe that, I couldn't just like have randomly selected any career path for you, that you would be working as hard as you are now for Khan Academy.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I mean, there's definitely an optimization. When I have a choice, I definitely am optimizing for what fills my bucket, so to speak. And I'm
Yeah.
learning a lot of 5-year-old language. What fills my fills my bucket? But no, it's an interesting. I have to ponder that. I have to meditate on that more. To what am I living in my own delusion or not?
I think you've made it. Here's how I just taught this undergraduate class called Grit Lab to 60 undergraduates at my university, University of Pennsylvania. And when I had to summarize the entire class in the last hour of the class, I said, "All right, three things: choose easy, work hard, pay it forward. And the choose easy was about choosing things that you're naturally or intrinsically interested in. They feel like they resonate with your values, you're good at them. Or like I actually think that's the part that you did. You chose something that you're very, very good at and committed to. It resonates with your deepest values. You love learning, you probably love teaching. Or okay, then what's number two? Well, number two is work hard. And number two is, you know what? The audit is part of running Khan Academy. You know what? Raising money is part of Khan Academy. I'm sure you don't like that either. You know what? Like doing whatever it is that you need to do. And I think that's where you're using these like mental hacks to kind of like get yourself to be excited about an audit or and that's the part where you do need to use discipline and strategies to work hard. And by the way, the third part is pay it forward, right? So, you know, for every good person in life, you know, that means you know, doing things for other people. But I do think that sometimes young people get these confused and they think they should choose hard and that the work should be easy. But like, no, 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 you choose things that are kind of fluent and fluid for you. And then there's always going to be friction. And that's when you have to learn all these ways to work hard. Does
No,
that make any
well,
sense?
no, it made a ton of sense. And this is a fascinating conversation. And whenever we're having these good conversations, the time goes by far faster than I would like. I hope we have more time to have this conversation because I think we're just getting started. Maybe we have time for one more question from YouTube. Sanjeev Kumar asks, "Can anyone develop grit at any age, or is it more specific for children and young adults?"
I really do believe that one of the great lessons of psychological science over the last few decades is that we are remarkably malleable. In other words, Carol Dweck is not only right about intelligence, but about pretty much every other facet of human nature. And I'm not saying that you can metamorphose into like some completely different human being in a day, but I do think, yeah, you can develop growth mindset, you can develop grit, you can become a nicer person, you can become a better listener, you can become a little more emotionally, like all of those things. And it's not just childhood, and it's not just adolescence, and it's not even just early adulthood or middle adulthood. There's not a point in the entire span of a life where people stop learning and growing if they're open to it.
Wow, I want us to have a conversation about each of those things because I want all of them for
Great.
myself.
I would love to have another conversation, Sal. You know, I'm a huge fan of Khan Academy
Let's
and I'm a
let's
huge fan of yours.
let's book it because I think we're just getting started. I mean, there's so many questions. Folks are. I'm trying to see if I could squeeze one more in. Let's see. This is a big one, but from YouTube, Bilal A asks, "Where does passion come from? I'm 31 and still trying to find my passion. I don't find anything interesting enough to put my soul into." Any thoughts there? I have some thoughts.
Okay, well, you start with your thoughts, and then this will be a good last question. What's your thought
My,
first?
my quick advice for Bilal is make space for exploration. I had that same angst when I was young. I had good jobs, but they weren't my passion. But I had space for exploration, and through that space for exploration, I was able to find my true passion.
Okay, that's great advice. I agree with you. And when I was 31, I was crying and crying on my living room couch, not knowing what I wanted to do with my life. Literally, I mean, ask my husband. The couch was nearly salty with like you could almost see the precipitate of the salt on the surface of the pillows. I was crying that much, and I really sympathize with this feeling of like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to have a passion, but I don't know what it is. And for me, it was giving myself a little freedom, but I think also it was reflecting on what I had become interested in the past. And when I thought back to when I was 16 years old, I remembered that when I was 16, I went to summer school, and because my parents who were very cheap like wouldn't pay for anything until like their kids could pay for, so I had saved up all my money, and the first time I could afford to do anything over the summer was when I was 16. So I got to choose, and I opened up that course catalog, and what did I choose? I chose two classes: psychology and nonfiction writing. And that's essentially all I do all day: psychology and nonfiction writing. So I guess I would suggest that if you're a 31-year-old who, like me, was maybe crying a lot, very angst ridden, is that in addition to giving yourself some space for self exploration, and is try to recall in your life the times where you were interested in things, that you were excited, and you might be able to piece together some of the puzzle. And I kid you not, when I was 32, I just like, I had thought about it. I was like, oh, I'm interested in psychology, I'm interested in writing. I used to teach math. That must mean I'm pretty good at math, or I like math. I don't know. And I think I should be a psychologist. And then I went to graduate school.
Wow. And then you became Angela Duckworth.
Well, well, then I learned a lot about psychology. I'll say that. Yeah, I think for me, I would say that now my work is my calling, and it is who I am. I think about it all the time. I think about it if I wake up in the middle of the night. I think about it on Sunday morning. I think about it on Friday night. And I think that's what this 31-year-old wants. They want that. And it was a process. I don't want to say it happened, in a moment in time, but there was, a long period of struggle. And I do empathize with that. And I have a lot of hope for you because, you too, Sal, probably couldn't have foreseen that this would be your calling, but it is. And callings generally, take a while to develop and to deepen over time.
No, that's incredible advice. And Angela, I think I'll commit us. We're going to have at least one more
Let's do
conversation
it.
for all to
I
answer
would
all these
love
other
that.
questions.
All
So
right.
thank you so much for joining us. Thanks everyone else for joining us. As you could tell, we wish we could do this for a long time more, but we will. It's good to end on a high point. People wanting more. So please join us for future live streams tomorrow. If I'm correct, I think we're gonna have Jim Nondorf from the University of Chicago, the head of admissions there. So look forward to seeing all of y'all tomorrow. Thanks, Angela.
Bye.